they re-released Avengers Endgame, I saw it yet again. I think that may have been the 5th or 6th time I've seen that movie. And I'm going to go on record right now and say that's the best superhero movie ever made. Ever made. I mean, I thought Endgame was the perfect capper to 10 years of Marvel movies. And then I heard that Spider-Man Far From Home was going to be the final Phase 3 film. So Spider-Man Far From Home was going to put the period on Phase 3. And I was like, really? You're really going to put out a film that's going to top what I just saw and call that the final straw for the Phase 3 era? Okay, you better come with your A game. I went to see Spider-Man Far From Home. They didn't come with their A game. What a waste. What a waste to end 10 years of brilliance with this movie. When I first saw Tom Holland as Spider-Man in Civil War, I believe it was, I was like, awesome. Dude is awesome. Best Peter Parker, best Spider-Man going. Yeah, I love it, right? Then we saw him in Infinity War, and we saw him in in Endgame, right? Then we saw him in Homecoming, and I'm thinking, okay, all right, he's a high school kid. I get it. He's kind of dorky. I have never liked how they've changed the characters. I'm talking about MJ, who's not Mary Jane, but it's Michelle Jones. They've changed Flash from a jock into a fellow geek who just happens to be slightly cooler, and I guess he's supposed to be wealthy. To me, that does away with the whole dynamic of the geek jock interaction and that conflict, as minor as it might be. And I didn't like how they have a character who clearly is based on Ganke from the Miles universe, which to me is kind of on the Miles Morales universe, which I also think should be the de facto Spider-Man at this point. But be that as it may, I wasn't really happy with the changes they made, but I rode with it, right? And I thought Homecoming was okay. And I was like, Spider-Man's, Peter Parker's still kind of dorky, still kind of goofy, but it's cute. I mean, the actor is still charming. Okay. And then we come to Infinity War and Endgame, and we get to see Peter Parker show some kind of gravitas. He expresses not dismay, but he expresses fear as we see him crumble away in Infinity War. And when we see Tony Stark die, Spider-Man or Peter Parker, he gets to express grief. And Tom Holland did a great job with those acting scenes. So I'm thinking, okay, he's grown. He's matured now. He's fought Thanos. We're gonna see a change. We're gonna see a more sedated, more grounded Peter Parker, even though he's still a high school student. No. If anything, they doubled down on presenting Peter Parker as a bigger dork in this film. It's clear to me, now that I look back on the other appearances of Tom Holland as Spider-Man, as great as an actor I think he is, and as charismatic and charming as I think he is, they're not giving us Spider-Man. They're not giving us Spider-Man. I've already told you about the characters that they've changed around, right? And now, because we didn't really get a solid, the one thing I'm going to say that makes Spider-Man unique, and that is Uncle Ben's death. With great power comes great responsibility. The single writing motivator for Peter Parker to become Spider-Man. That's one thing. We don't get that. They try to, and they've done this over the few films he's been in, they keep trying to wedge in Tony Stark as his mentor or his replacement Uncle Ben. And I don't like that. That's not Spider-Man. You know why? Because what makes Spider-Man unique, or what made him unique to me as a character, And I'm going all the way back to, what was it, Amazing Fantasy, when Spider-Man first appeared, when we had Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, the quintessential Spider-Man team, next to John Romita, of course, as the artist. What made Spider-Man stand out was he was a high school kid who was a genius. He was resourceful. He was able to sew together his own costume. He created his own web shooters, and he developed his own web fluid that he probably could have sold and patented for millions of dollars. He did that in his bedroom. He did all that. That's what made Spider-Man unique. The other thing was that when he was Peter Parker, yeah, he was dorky, but he was still smart. He was still the smartest guy in the room. I don't get that from Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Other thing is, when Spider-Man would put on the Spider-Man outfit, the costume, he became a wisecracking, confident, kick-ass, smug, funny character. I'm not getting that from this Spider-Man either. So, as much as I like Tom Holland, I don't know if it's the direction he's been getting. And I say that of the Russos as well, although the Russos, like I said, did give him a couple moments to shine in Infinity War and in Endgame. I don't know if it's the direction he's been getting, but this is a Spider-Man, but it's not Spider-Man. Kind of like I said about the Joker in Dark Knight. He's a bad guy, but he's not the Joker, as far as I'm concerned. I'm applying that same concept to this Spider-Man. Here's another reason I don't think this is a real Spider-Man that I'm used to. Like I said, Peter Parker is so smart, he built all of his gadgets, right? In this one, all he does is he gets costumes and uniforms from Tony Stark. There's a scene in this movie, and I'm spoiling, there's a scene in this film where I think they're in London, and he needs another Spider-Man suit, and Happy appears in, I'm going to call it a Quinjet, and he tells him to go in the back room and design a costume. And he starts doing the whole Tony Stark thing where he's using heads-up displays and holographic, non-tactile surfaces and pushing things back and this and that and designing, and that's not Spider-Man. That's James Bond with Q gadgets. That's not, to me, what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. I don't buy that. And I've hated all along how beholden this Spider-Man is to Tony Stark. I mean, I liked the moment where Stark hugs Parker at the end of Endgame. That was a nice moment, okay. But here, even this movie is beholden to Tony Stark, and Tony Stark is dead. The first 15 minutes of this film, I get no Spider-Man. I get what I'm going to call a silly, rom-com-ish story, right, between MJ and Parker, and, it's like a Christopher Columbus, Johnny Hughes type of thing. And it seems like every waking moment we get references back to Iron Man, as if you can't do a Spider-Man movie without referencing Iron Man. Okay, I know he was a popular character, but let it go. Spider-Man, in the history and the greater scheme of things, was always a more popular character than Iron Man. So, as far as the character goes, I wasn't really happy with this film because I'm tired of seeing Peter Parker portrayed as a goof, as a guy who reacts to everything, as a guy who seems like he's always 2 steps behind everything that's happening around him. And that's how they portray him in this film. He's too goofy. There's a scene where they're in Prague, I believe it is, and he's getting a new suit or something like that. And he gets photographed with his pants down with a woman from S.H.I.E.L.D., I think, who's giving him a new suit. What stupidness is that? All right, let's talk about the villain. And again, I'm spoiling. And that's another problem with the film I had as a Spider-Man reader, comic book reader from back in the day. I mean, anyone who has read any Spider-Man comic book that had Mysterio in it, you know that Mysterio is a villain. So I'm not sure if they thought they were fooling us diehard fans, but that was a twist that, I was just waiting to come. It was predictable. that Mysterio was the villain, not these elemental water, earth, fire creatures, whatever. So let's talk about Mysterio. We know he's a villain. He's got to be one of the worst villains I've ever seen in an MCU affiliated movie. Now, don't get me wrong. Mysterio as a character is a dope character. The concept of Mysterio, even in this film, is dope. His power set is dope. Don't get me wrong with that. What I did have a problem with is what they chose to do with Mysterio in this movie. His motivation is so weak, it's so lame, it's almost laughable. Basically, and I'm spoiling, that's how much I respect this film. Basically, his motivation is he wants to be a bigger hero than Tony Stark. That's it. He wants to be a big hero on the level of the Avengers. And that's his motivation. And how does he go about doing this? How does he go about achieving this goal? By creating these elementals, illusions of elementals, I should say, that he then goes and fights and defeats, allegedly. And that, he believes, is supposed to win over the public that he is a better hero than any of the Avengers. Now, mind you, we as an audience have just been emotionally moved and put through the ringer of seeing Endgame, I'm sure multiple times, where the Avengers brought back half of the universe. So Mysterio, who feels like he got cheated by Tony Stark because Mysterio developed holographic technology, which we saw in Civil War. They reveal here when Tony was doing that TED Talk, and he does a hologram of himself as a teenager with his parents. We learned that Mysterio, or Quentin Beck, developed that, but then Tony decided he wasn't going to move forward with it for whatever reason. I can't remember. So Quentin Beck is simply mad that Tony Stark abandoned him, and he feels he's a better hero than Tony Stark. Now, to me, that whole motivation sounds somewhat familiar when I think about Iron Man 3 and the character that Guy Pearce played. It was lame then, it's lame now. Speaking of Iron Man 3, and it's ironic that I keep referencing Iron Man movies, because in this movie, they won't let the man Tony Stark rest in peace, so why should I? Mysterio there's another element of this character that reminded me of something about Iron Man 3 that I didn't like. Iron Man 3, we saw Tony outside of the uniform a few times, while letting the uniforms do all the fighting while he's sitting safe in the back of a van, which to me takes away any investment that I have of any stakes for the character that's supposed to be the hero. Well, turns out that's how Mysterio, or Quentin Beck, operates as well. All of the stuff that we see him, where we see him fighting these elementals and whatnot, it's all illusions while he's standing someplace in a safe distance from the whole thing. Takes me completely out of the film. So since I'm spoiling and don't give a damn, let me tell you that the basic plot of this movie is that Quentin Beck, who has created in the first half of the film, or first act, has created these illusions that are actually, I think they're shield drones that can project holograms. These are the holograms that he developed that Tony Stark was going to use but decided not to. He creates these initial holograms by using these drones that can project images, but they can also shoot bullets, I guess. Okay, all right, whatever, that's fine. So that's how he gets on the map. Turns out that he's basically following Peter throughout Europe because Peter has something that he was given from by Nick Fury. And that is, he's given a pair of Tony Stark's, again, Tony Stark, he's given a pair of Tony Stark's glasses, which contains software that's called Edith. Now, I won't spoil what that means. It's an acronym. It's kind of cute, very Tony Starkish. I won't give away that. So basically, Mysterio wants to get these glasses from Peter Parker because I forget how he found out that Nick Fury gave them to Peter Parker. Well, these glasses basically, like I said, control multiple satellites that have these drones, which is odd. We've never heard of this technology before. But Stark leaves the glasses for Spider-Man, for Peter Parker. I mean, I'm not even going to ask why you would leave such a deadly piece of hardware to a high school kid, particularly one who has not grown or matured at all, it seems like. But be that as it may, the plot must continue, right? Quentin Beck has been following Parker throughout Europe and creating these illusions to build a reputation, and then he finally meets Peter Parker through Nick Fury, okay? Claiming to be from another universe. Well, turns out that's a lie. So I asked myself, why did they even introduce that then? Why, what is that supposed to be, like a fan gaslighting? I don't get it. But the main plot, getting back to that, is that Mysterio wants to get those glasses from Parker so that he can create bigger holograms with more drones. Wow, what an exciting motivation. It's not at all like Lex Luthor wanting to have California fall into the ocean so that he can create more real estate, thus making the stakes really high. It's not like Thanos, who succeeds in wiping out 50% of the universe and the Avengers have to somehow overcome that. No, stand back, everyone. We've got a villain now, post-Endgame, that wants to look like a hero, so he has to make bigger holograms. That's the plot in the movie that they wanted to end Phase 3 on after giving us Endgame. But let me continue. Okay, so there's a moment in the middle act of this film that is completely implausible, stupid, ridiculous, lazy screenwriting. As I said, Quentin Beck wants to get those glasses that control this network of drones from Peter Parker, right? Okay. What happens? He meets Peter Parker, takes him out to a bar, and after knowing Peter Parker for all of maybe a couple days, Peter decides, I don't want the glasses. You can have them, Quentin Beck, whom I've only known for 48 hours. You can have this device that controls a network of killer drones. How does Peter know they're killer drones? Because the screenwriters purposefully included a scene where Peter Parker, in his immaturity, his foolishness, almost kills a fellow classmate. So he knows how dangerous those glasses are. He knows they control a fleet of killer drones, but he hands them over to someone he's only known for 48 hours. Are we dealing with the screenwriters of Star Trek Discovery with this movie? So, screenwriting like that leaves lots of questions to be answered. Namely, if Quentin Beck has successfully created large holograms that have built up his reputation already, why is it so important for him to get those glasses so he can just get more drones? And what he does with the additional drones is not that much more impressive than what he did with the drones that he had prior to getting the glasses. So why should I care? There are no stakes here. None. Remember, I just saw the universe blinked out, or blipped out as they refer to in this film. I'll get to that. I just saw half the universe blipped out in the previous film. You think I give a about some holograms? Next question, obviously, is why the would Peter Parker just hand over a pair of glasses to a deadly arsenal to some guy he hasn't known but 2 days? There's that. Third question, and it leads to another spoiler, which it's not really a spoiler. We've seen in the trailer the scene where Nick Fury catches up with Spider-Man. I think he's still in Venice at the time. He tranquilizes Ned Leeds. Ooh, my bad. He tranquilizes Ned, and during the subsequent scenes, Parker reveals that he needs a new costume, and Nick Fury says, well, just put on your red and blue, and Peter Parker's like, well, I can't wear that costume here in Europe because, if I'm here, then all of a sudden people see Spider-Man here, they'll put 2 and 2 together. That makes sense. That's been a conflict, a cool conflict for many a comic book character, right? So what do? They give him a black costume that has the same Spider-Man eyelets, right? And in a scene where he's saving the classmates, I think they go to the opera. Yeah, they're in Prague, right? And he's swinging on his webs. He's cleaning the walls. He's shooting his web shooters. And so we're supposed to think, oh, well, people won't recognize him as Spider-Man because he's wearing a black costume, even though he's doing the same shit that Spider-Man always does. And he has the same hood and cowl as Spider-Man with the same eyelets. What? Makes zero sense. Zero. They even go so far as to give this guy who's clearly Spider-Man, just wearing a black suit, they even give him another name. They give him a name because they can't figure out who he is. I'm not going to reveal the name because I don't want to spoil that. Maybe you'll have a good time when they reveal that, but whatever. A lot of time is also devoted in this film to this, juvenile romance between MJ, you can't call her Mary Jane, between MJ and Peter Parker. And I gotta say, I don't like any of the characters that he hangs out with in Flash Thompson, don't like that character because he's not the jock he's supposed to be. That would add some more dynamic conflict. MJ, I don't see what anyone would see in this girl. She's the most boring, annoying, angst-ridden, self-absorbed character in the Spider-Man franchise. Choice dialogue that makes me say that. There's a scene where I think they're getting prepared for the opera. Peter Parker says, "You look pretty." Just a compliment. She says, "Oh, and I suppose that gives me value." Yeah, nope. Can't stand her. She's the Brie Larson / Captain Marvel of the Spider-Man universe. Get her out of here. One side character that I did enjoy was Ned Leeds. I don't know the actor's name. A young man of Asian descent, which again I think is a smack in the face to cannibalize that character from Miles, from Miles's universe, which indicates to me that they may not have any plan to introduce Miles in a live-action film because they've already kind of, done away with one of his most interesting characters, Miles's most interesting characters. They transplanted him here and given him an Anglo name. I said it. Okay. There's a little humorous subplot with Ned and another character that I'm going to get into. They kind of have an on-again, off-again romance, which that was cool to see, Ned getting some love, right? The person that he gets involved with is Betty Brant. Okay, so I don't know what they're doing. First of all, Betty Brant would be a great character to set up in a future Spider-Man film. Maybe 2 films down the road. But Betty Brant works at the Daily Bugle, right? She does not work at the high school, or she does not appear in the high school where Parker is, and she's not a long, blonde-haired girl. All right, so you can crucify me if you want that I want to stick to canon in terms of the characterizations. I don't care. You pray on it. I'm saying how I feel. I don't like that. I don't like how they're just willy-nilly mixing and moshing up these characters and spitting in the face of the traditionalism of Spider-Man. I'll talk about what I did like about the movie, which won't take too long. At the beginning, there is a kind of humorous summation of what happened in Infinity War and Endgame. We see Betty Brant and another kid giving a high school broadcast about what happened. They refer to the event as the blip. And even though I've talked to some people who were kind of like, they didn't like that because they thought that it didn't give the event the amount of gravitas that it required. And I can see that. But, some people are also saying, well, they wanted to, they had to make Spider-Man, this movie, light and fun after the seriousness of Endgame. Well, okay, so then I bought it. I bought this scene where they talk about what happened in the blip, And I could see vacuous high school kids presenting that news in the manner that they presented at the beginning of this movie. So that was cool. There is a moment that I liked in a scene that I've already mentioned that I thought was overall kind of poorly structured. The scene where Mysterio and Peter Parker are in a bar. Well, once Peter Parker inexplicably hands over the Edith glasses to Quentin Beck, Mysterio, he leaves, and then the whole bar disintegrates. And we realize that Mysterio has created this illusion to get those glasses from Parker. And as implausible as that is, because we never see the exterior of the bar, so it's like, how did he manage to make that happen? How did he trick Peter Parker into thinking it was a real bar? Once they enter the bar, how's that work? But visually, it was a cool moment. This movie did have some fantastic CG. It's some of the best in any Spider-Man movie I've seen. The elementals look good. The Spider-Man swinging through the air looked great. The illusions were fantastic, so I will give the movie that. Speaking of that, one scene that was a standout scene. It's when Mysterio finally presents himself as a threat to Spider-Man, and they spend a good 2 or 3 minutes with Mysterio torturing Spider-Man with all these illusions, and he can't tell what's real and what's not. And he eventually gets, I don't want to spoil this, but at the end of that scene, something happens to him where, you kind of think, I know Spider-Man's super strong, but it seems like he might be dead. He should have been killed. But that was a standout scene. I will give them that. I applaud them for that. And the last scene, which I thought was badass, and it was one of the only scenes in this film where I felt like I was dealing with Spider-Man, the Spider-Man that I know, is when Parker gets control of his spidey senses for the first time. I won't reveal or spoil a running gag that they have that starts with Aunt May. She gives Peter's spidey senses a different name. I'm not going to say what it is. It is kind of funny, and it goes throughout the movie. It gets called back throughout the movie. But the scene where he's fighting Mysterio and he gains his spider senses, that was a badass scene. I got to give it to him. We get 2 credit scenes, one after the major credits and then one at the very end of all the credits. They were both to me. The first one where Peter's revealed by J. Jonah Jameson, which, that scene had some stunt casting with J.K. Simmons, I believe his name is, as J. Jonah Jameson. I'm like, who gives a shit? How many people know Peter Parker? Plus, that takes place, the reveal of Peter Parker takes place on footage that J. Jonah Jameson displays in Times Square on one of the Jumbotrons. He reveals Peter Parker, but we see that the footage came from Mysterio, who's been proven to be a master illusionist. So what's the cliffhanger there? I don't get it. Why would people believe this guy that has been revealed as a fraud? There's that. Then at the end, I guess the whole thing was illusion, fakery, trickery. We kind of find out that the Nick Fury that we've seen throughout this movie, and who knows, maybe previous movies, is Talos, I think his name is. One of the scrolls from the head scroll from Captain Marvel. So, and then we see Nick Fury on some spaceship heading some organization that I'm not familiar with, called Sword. Okay, so I don't know. That didn't do much for me either. It makes me wonder, where's Maria Hill? If the person we saw in this movie was a Skrull, where's the real one? We saw her in Endgame. What happened to the real one? Is she up on the ship too? Okay, I'm just rambling right now. But there it is. In summation, I was disappointed with this movie. I wasn't expecting to be blown away by it because I'd seen Endgame, and I just wasn't feeling that they were going to bring anything that would be a better period to the end of Phase 3, and they fell way short. This is not what you follow up with after giving us Endgame. I've said Endgame once again changed the paradigm for superhero comic book movies. And this movie took a step back. Okay? So, I don't know what they're going to do with the next Spider-Man, but they better do something with Tom Holland's portrayal. I need to see him acting more adult, acting like someone who understands he has great power and realizes that he has to behave like he has great responsibility and not be such a doofus. All right. So I'm giving this movie, hey, I got to do it. I'm giving it 2 out of 5 reels. I know a lot of you guys loved it. I know it's going to make a lot of money. That's how I feel. That's where I stand. Let me know where I'm wrong. Tell me if I misinterpreted something, or tell me why you think I'm wrong about how I feel this way. I mean, I can't be wrong about my own opinion, but give it a shot. Let me know. All right? And that's the martini.